Hello and welcome to the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for February 10th, 2021. This is a virtual meeting being held due to the advisements regarding COVID-19 pandemic. Participants can be involved through the city's agenda on the city's website. And there are also instructions to call in there if you can't join by Zoom. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order and get a roll call attendance. Karen?
Okay, Mr. Hartley?
Here.
Holst? We got Mr. Holst is, looks like he's connecting to audio right now. Mr. Larson?
Here.
Mr. Lieber?
Here.
Ms. Lynch?
Here.
Ms. Perdeau is absent. Ms. Saul?
Here.
Mr. Schrod?
Here.
And Ms. Sears is also absent tonight.
All right, thank you, Karen. With that, we'll call the meeting to order and we'll entertain comments or motion to receive and approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. All right, we're going to open up to public comment. So this is allowing anyone to speak who is speaking to an item that's not on the agenda. So if you would like to make a comment not on the agenda, you can raise your hand in the chat section. If you are by phone, I think you can dial *9. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comments section and move to our agenda. First item on our agenda is the presentation of the draft Imagine College Hill vision plan. I believe Shell is going to kick that off and have some introductions to make.
Thank you, Chairperson Lieber. Thank you, Planning and Zoning Commissioners, for your time tonight. I am excited to welcome our consultants for the College Hill Vision Plan, Farrell and Madden, with Jeff Farrell and Mary Madden. And they've been working with the city with the downtown vision plan that was adopted in the end of 2019, and also working with the downtown code updates that you'll be hearing more about later on this month. And tonight they'll be giving a presentation regarding the findings that of the College Hill neighborhood. So I'll let them take away.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We checked the technology before, so hopefully we're good to go. Can everyone see that? Okay. Thanks for letting us present for you this evening. Jeff and I are going to cover a lot of information, hopefully engaging, enlightening, presenting a lot of opportunities for the College Hill neighborhood. So I'm going to jump in. I think I'm going to jump in. I want to start by just reminding you that just a little bit more than a year ago, the City Council initiated this project when they adopted a set of priorities for the project, which you should be able to see there. Really looking at what was going on in the College Hill neighborhood, wanting to see a little more than 25 years ago, a College Hill neighborhood plan was developed. And so they decided it was really probably time to revisit that plan to see what had been completed and how it might need to be adjusted and moving forward. Looking for opportunities as the times and market change and the demographics change about what future development in the area might look like. What opportunities there might be for revitalization, for economic development, for continuing to stabilize neighborhoods around the University of Northern Iowa. and really just to make sure that the zoning that is in existence for that area is producing the type of development that the community would like to see. So that was sort of the background for this project getting underway. As Michelle mentioned, our team was involved in leading the downtown plan and have been working on the downtown zoning code update. And so as we were working on that project, the city re-engaged us to continue sort of the same method to work with the College Hill area. One thing I do want to highlight, the study area here is outlined in yellow. It is a larger area than most people probably think of as College Hill. It does go as far north as 12th Street, and it does go south of University. It wraps around the campus, around the east sides of the campus, and it goes over as far as the highway and the Cedar River bicycle trail, picks up a little section of the Main Street corridor. On the northern boundary, it does abut the area that was included for the downtown vision plan. So that will give you an idea of the relationship to the two areas. We're going to literally walk through the plan to make sure you know how it is organized, what some of the major concepts are. And I do want to highlight that this is a long-range vision plan. The timeline is going to depend on, the local economy. There are a lot of ideas in here. Many of them are going to depend on private property owners taking initiative. The city is not going to require people to undertake any of these activities. So depending on the economy, depending on private property owners' choices, the timeline and exact sequence that some of these activities might come to fruition is really going to depend on individual choices. What's in this plan? There's an executive summary, as you might expect, introduction to the overall process, background analysis, what we did during the charrette last fall, then moving forward, what the vision for the area is, the next steps for the short term, and then appendix, a lot of the raw information that was produced during the course of the project. Just a high level, the executive summary includes more than the recommendations. It sort of can give you a quick overview in about 4 pages of what's in the plan, but we do want to touch on some of the recommendations. First and foremost is that this effort is to continue the good work of the College Hill Partnership. There's a lot of emphasis on the public realm. That's the streets and sidewalks and the parks, what happens beyond the private buildings. There's a lot of discussion about the idea of walkability. There's also emphasis on creating a more multimodal environment. How do you create a place that people can get around and not have the expectation that every trip has to be taken in a private automobile? There's a lot of discussion about the economic potential, the market for housing, as well as retail and restaurant opportunities. There's some discussion about gateways. How do people know, when they're arriving on College Hill? How is it different from the rest of the city? One of the points that's become really evident as we've all been dealing with the pandemic, there is a lot of discussion about how we could create new or improved public spaces, more outdoor areas for people to gather. There's discussion about adjusting the rules for development. If the city wants to see redevelopment, one of the major goals from the plan 25 years ago was revitalizing the area. And if some of that hasn't come to fruition, perhaps there is a need to adjust some of the rules. Another big idea is to recognize that College Hill is really a unique place within the city of Cedar Falls. It's not downtown, but it's also not some of the suburban commercial shopping areas. So really trying to emphasize and take advantage of what makes College Hill unique, and does it need to be treated differently in some of the activities that the city undertakes. There's an idea that the process for redevelopment should be more transparent and clear and equal for everybody, whether it's a small property owner or a larger property owner. We had a lot of input from the bicycle community, and there's a strong desire that the bicycle network be improved or made more visible. People talked about it being a great area to ride bikes, but sometimes it was unclear how you get from the university to the trails, especially for new students. How do you get from UNI to downtown? And are there ways to make sure that's clear for people on bicycles of all skill levels? And last but not least, looking at ways to better manage the supply of parking, both the public parking in lots and on the streets, as well as the way private parking is handled and the university. So what did we do when we undertook this visioning process? First and foremost, it was really a public process. I want to emphasize that. This plan is not about our firm or our team members. It's really about the community of College Hill and the city of Cedar Falls. So big picture, last winter we visited Cedar Falls. We had some nice chilly days to physically get out and look around. We reviewed as I mentioned, the previous College Hill plan. We did a lot of photographing, walking around. We also did a public event on the campus at the CEEE Center. Some of you may have been there, I don't know. We had members of the public. We had a few activities. You can see the map there with the red and green dots. We asked people to identify the places on College Hill that they liked, the places they didn't like, whether they didn't like what was there or they thought it could be improved. We also did the activity that's called a visual preference exercise. You can see that on the right hand of your screen, where we were thinking prospectively, if there are going to be new buildings on the hill or in the surrounding neighborhoods, what did people like? What did they not like? The scale, the characteristics, how they were arranged, etc. So this information is the details of the maps as well as the visual preference exercise. All of that work is included in detail in the appendix if you're curious to see the specific feedback that we got in that process. We also did some more technical geeky review. We had an economist on our team who really looked at the demographics, the housing market, the retail market, in Cedar Falls on the whole, as well as within the College Hill neighborhood, to see how it was like the rest of the city, how it was different. We had a transportation engineer on our team who took a look at the mobility issues, the biking, the transit system, as well as taking a review of the parking study that had recently been completed. And then we had other members of our team looking at the existing zoning for College Hill, not just the base zoning, but also the overlay district, which was one of the products of the previous neighborhood plan. So that was a lot of background research. And one of the good things was we were able to do a lot of that off-site, because right about this time, we were supposed to come back in March to do an on-site public design charrette. And as we all know, everything got shut down thanks to COVID-19. And so we sort of shifted gears and started thinking, how are we going to handle this differently? So we went into a little bit of a slowdown period as we figured that out. And then we restarted in the fall, and we did what we called a virtual charrette. Since we weren't able to travel back and we weren't able to do public engagement face-to-face as we would hope, we worked to figure out how can we do this online using web-based tools like you all I know have been using for your planning commission. So what we did during that week in October, there's members of our teams, we've all gotten used to the Brady Bunch boxes. We worked off-site, the design team, the economist, our computer visualization person. We worked together, but we also held some public meetings. We kicked the week off with a virtual hands-on session where folks, we were on a web meeting, we broke into smaller groups, people looked at aerials, gave us feedback. what's going on around the College Hill area today. This is an example. We also had studio Q&A. We had a couple of times where people could ask us questions. We were available to answer their questions about what we were working on. We did a series of technical meetings with property owners, with the Ped Bike Committee, with the folks who manage parking, both for the university and the city. Our economists met with a lot of property owners, realtors, developers. We met with the public works folks, and then we wrapped the week up with a work in progress presentation that we made with you all. I want to highlight one of the things we like to do, visioning. We like to think about what the future might hold, what are the great ideas. But we've also found it's really important that that work be based on the reality of the local community. So as we were working through the virtual charrette, there were a few things I want to highlight. All of this market considerations report is included in the appendix of the vision plan, but a few key points that I have here on the screen I want to emphasize. One is that the University of Iowa, Northern Iowa, has shrunk somewhat. It seems to be stabilized. They feel they're going to grow, but they're not going to grow rapidly. So that's really important to keep in mind. The College Hill area is really integrated with the university. And so the amount of growth in new housing and commercial development is really intertwined with the enrollment at UNI. And I don't think that we can overemphasize that point. But in that regard, the dynamics of the housing market and where students are interested in living is also shifting. There is a regular ongoing demand that people want to live close to the campus. The city is interested in the students living close to the campus. So there is the market potential to add more housing close to the campus. But no one should have an expectation that there's a market to build a 500 unit apartment complex right next to UNI. The market can't support that, but it can support a lot of incremental, small scale redevelopment. And so that's one of the primary focuses that the visioning looked at, is how that could be handled. Another big piece is currently the parking standards require one parking space for every bedroom. When you look at the small lots on the hill and the fact that most of the apartments are currently rented, if there is not an ability to handle parking differently, the likelihood of people who currently have rental properties that are full and cash flowing, they have little incentive to redevelop unless a new approach is considered. You just can't fit the parking one per bedroom on these sites unless a lot more housing is developed. So this study looks at that in more detail. One thing we heard a lot was people wanted different restaurants, different shops, et cetera. But when you look at the economics of that, there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation. You need more people to support a broader diversity of shops and businesses. Simultaneously, if you have different businesses and shops, then you're likely to attract a broader customer base. So that really has to be looked at in tandem. We heard a lot about the desire to reconnect the lower and upper hill. There's a little bit of a dead space, a no man's land between the area closer to the university and then closer to 20th Street. So that's one thing we looked at in a little bit more detail. And then again, last but not least, especially living through the pandemic, there was really a strong feeling that there needed to be more opportunities for outdoor public spaces, gathering spaces, what could make the area more attractive for the community. So those are high-level points that are really tied into the realities currently. So as we move forward with the vision plan, we really started thinking there needs to be a different strategy. It needs to be integrated, not just the private development, not just the public sector, not just the businesses, not just the parking, but really how do all of those pieces work together? How can they be balanced? If you want to unlock that potential for redevelopment and revitalization, And if in fact more students are brought closer to campus, means more walkability, less driving to campus. But currently the parking study says there's really not a parking problem on the Hill. But if you bring more people closer, we want to just make sure that at that point in time, as redevelopment takes place, it should be kept in mind that there may be a point when you need to reconsider how parking is managed on the Hill and whether or not a parking district may make sense as you move forward with the redevelopment. Another big piece of this plan is thinking about the area physically and what can happen in the area. We worked through with what we heard from the community and our analysis and came up with what we call the big ideas out of the visioning process. I'm going to just kind of go through those. These are explained in more detail in the plan. As I mentioned earlier, the number one thing that we heard from community members is the importance to stabilize and enhance the neighborhoods. Everyone knows there's a large rental population, but can you balance home ownership and renters? So it's a desirable place for lots of different people to live. The idea, as I've already mentioned, to really concentrate and intensify student housing closer to the campus so students can walk to campus. And so there's less of a demand encroaching into the neighborhoods, less demand for parking as you get further away. So those areas can be more seen as just traditional neighborhoods. The idea to reconnect the upper and the lower Hill. The idea that there are green spaces all sprinkled around the study area, but a lot of them are not very accessible. They could be improved. We also heard that there are some of the streets that really need to have the street trees replanted. So that's an important ongoing feature. Managing parking better, whether that be the city public parking, the private parking, the university parking. Improving walkability throughout. There's a lot of sidewalk work that's been done. Streets have been rebuilt, but when we did a survey with the students, one of the things they highlighted was there are areas within the study area where there are no sidewalks at all, or the sidewalks are in disrepair. So that's a specific thing. How do you make it a nice place to walk, a safe place to walk, a comfortable place? Making biking easier. I highlighted that earlier. And then the idea to increase the retail and dining options. So all of these really came out of that visioning process last October. Another thing that we started looking at is what is the study area like? We immediately recognized it's not all the same when you look at the area from 12th Street down to University and from Main Street over to Hudson. There are a lot of different things going on. And so we looked at what are these areas like now, and also how might they change for the future, or how might they stay the same? So I want to quickly go over, when we talk about a character area, we're not just talking about land use, which I know a lot of times in planning and zoning, that's how we frame everything. I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. You know, both of these pictures are townhouses or row houses, but I think we would all agree, same use, but they are not the same. Similarly, you can have a Target in very different form, different shape, different size. So again, the use is the same, but their character is really different. So when we think about character areas, we really think about what is the private development like, what's the private property like, but also what's the public realm like, what are the streets and sidewalks like, and what's the relationship between the public and the private realm. So it can be a very traditional, walkable place. Also, it can be great for automobiles and less emphasis on people. Again, the public realm plus the private development all comes together to create that character area. So when we were studying the area, and as we went through the visioning process, we started identifying distinctly different areas. You may not recognize these names, because I will say we took some creative license in how to characterize the areas and what to name them. So this is, you know, you may not recognize these, but In the plan, each of these has a description physically where it's located, what the character is like now, and how it might change or stay the same for the future. So these are really 8 geographic areas, and the 9th one is really a distinct location. There was a lot of conversation that the intersection at Main Street and Searly Boulevard is really a gateway when people are coming to College Hill, whether they be coming from in a vehicle or on a bicycle. This is sort of where you're start entering the College Hill neighborhood. Apologize, I hit the wrong button. Another piece that's in the plan are what we call frontages, and this is where we're starting to think about how the zoning might be set up in the future. These start getting their pictures, there are descriptions, and it's sort of combining the thought of what might the buildings be like, how would they relate to the street, how big might they be, what uses might be allowed, what the sidewalks would be like. We set up 4 of these, and we talk about where they would apply in the different character areas. And the green boxes start getting into more specifics about how tall the buildings are, how much of the lot they cover, what the uses are, et cetera. So that's sort of laying the foundation for what new zoning might be for these areas. With that, that's a lot of background, covered a lot of ground. I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, and hopefully we will be synchronized. He's going to walk you through the ideas, the vision plan, and I'm going to try to advance slides for him. Jeff.
All right, on to the vision. The first thing to notice when you look at the image on the left side of the screen is how much of that aerial photograph, how much of the study area we didn't draw on. That means there's no idea about change there. That is the stabilize and enhance part of the plan. Everybody, I would say, what's there is cool. People were saying continue the city's efforts to stabilize it. And as Mary mentioned, some people talked about give our street trees a little bit of help. But the big idea for the vast majority of the study area is not to change it, but enhance it. Now zooming into the area around the university, which is where the idea of more intense building and change would happen. You see there's a lot going on in the illustrative plan. First, the dark gray, the charcoal color buildings, those are all existing. And the reddish brown buildings, those are sort of illustrative buildings for an idea about how new buildings could go in to kind of fill out the missing teeth. You notice all the numbers on the plan. Those all refer to a set of illustrative drawings that we're going to show you next, except for number 9, which is identifying the university. But our team did a series of drawings illustrating some as prototypical projects that really could go anywhere, they're examples, and others that are really specific to one place. You could think of these as what ifs. The first, and this is a prototypical project for the stabilize and enhance areas. We picked a couple of lots, one the standard 66, the other is a little bit wider to show what could be built on it. And these are really ideas about this could be built throughout. A couple of things to notice. One, the parking is in back, not in front. That's very specific. For this example, they've got an alley, and that's great when you have it. But I'll emphasize again, the garage doors are not on the front of the building. Instead, we're talking about front porches. The 2 examples are houses. The one closer to Searly Boulevard is a single house. It may have an accessory dwelling unit in back on top of the garage. The other one, farther away from Searly, is a 2-unit house, which may also have accessory dwelling units. And the idea is that they're fitting into the best traditions of the houses in that area. So new construction, we're thinking this would be a good model. And now that gateway area at Main and Searly. This is a proposal, 2 steps. The first one is to improve the pedestrian and bicycle connections. For bicycles, this is really a key point to get from the neighborhood over and link up to the city's trail system. A lot of people talked about that. And then this second iteration of this is to show how these buildings on that corner could be redeveloped. I would point out that there's an idea that these new, more larger buildings could be about the same use they are now. That building on the far corner across Main Street is showing a building that includes a gas station. It's got the pumps in back. So could be similar uses, but a very different form. And next, that idea talked about reconnecting the upper and lower hill. If you look, the close street is College Street. On the far right of College Street, you see the end of Upper Hill. Yes, farther away from the creek, and the shops, kind of a storefront street. And then coming down the hill, you come to the Bonnie's area, the large parking lot, the 1-story building. And then at the very bottom of the screen, you see the pumps for the gas station and the 4 small shopfront buildings that are the upper hill. The proposal for redevelopment.
That's the reverse. That's the lower hill. The other is the upper hill.
Did I say upper for both places? Okay, down to the left is lower because it's closer to the creek. Anyway, let's move on to the transformation. And as you can see, these are, 3 or 4-story mixed use buildings. They're shown in two distinct buildings. One corresponds to the Bonnie's lot properties and the other corresponds to another set of properties. There's more detail on these, and the people who are designing them were dealing with the topo and the parking, tuck under parking, et cetera. But it's an example of the kind of redevelopment that's possible with some tweaks. And you can imagine on that side of the street, it's a completely connected pedestrian experience walking in front of storefronts and restaurants from 22nd to 21st. And this is our team member, Steve Price. Now you're up with your back toward the university, looking north. That's Bonnie's on the right. You see little bits of purple. And it's an area that could use, it's not a very kind photograph, I have to say, but could use a little bit of transformation. And there's an idea that you, with some combination of public, the government changing its rules and some investment, and the private sector investing and building on that. It's a partnership. And you start to do things like improving the streetscape, improving the pedestrian crossings, and adding private sector development. And the first building I want to point out is there's a sign on that corner that says Bonnie's. There's an idea that this Bonnie's could move in and have the store on the ground floor and apartments or condominiums above. Parking is in back. And next slide. And it becomes an area that kind of starts to snowball and becoming a really attractive place for retail and a place to live and work. And one thought here, you can imagine, there's one more transformation. Get that last building in on the far right corner. Imagine a prospective UNI student's family coming to College Hill and seeing a scene like this instead of a scene like that. And something we talk about in the plan, there's UNI and the city are kind of married. They really need to work together, and the health of UNI is also the health of College Hill. So, Now jumping for some projects, we're going to jump into closer to the university. Here's on Murner Avenue in the front. On the far right, you just see the edge of those white building forms. That's the university itself. The parking garage is the big block on the right. And a couple of different transformations. Right now, there are a lot of single family houses there. I can't say they're all being done as student housing, but certainly a lot of them. Transformation number one, look at the two lots on the left of 22nd. Now, these are done where each lot could turn into two row houses that parking in back. And this development, either of those lots could develop individually or together. So that's a smaller scale increment of development, but it can happen. It's kind of self-sufficient. The next transformation involves lots that are ganged together. Go ahead. And these are small apartment buildings. So you're talking about a lot of housing. The university is right there. I'll say a minor word. You can imagine most of the people who live here might be students, but you'd probably be surprised how some other people would not mind living in an urban environment like this, really close to the university, such as myself. Next slide. And then all together, so you see a big transformation in this area and a lot of housing right next to the university, right next to shops on College. And I'm kind of especially fond of this project. Right now, 23rd Street is closed. It's been closed for a while because it's just an awkward intersection for cars to pass through. And it's being used as a parking lot and clearly underutilized. This is a project that takes advantage of that. It's a great opportunity to turn that parking lot into still a place for parking most of the time, but you could turn it into a plaza, and then for special events, maybe on weekends, it becomes a pedestrian plaza, kind of festival street. And by the way, it's also something that by taking a little bit more care with it, planting trees, et cetera, it's an opportunity to develop buildings that are facing onto the plaza. This view showing 2- and 3-story buildings facing onto it. Another iteration shows the property closest to 23rd, which is university property, by the way, developing as a larger 3-story building. And I will say the university has seen both of these, and they're very interested. That's not to say they've hired an architect, but they're very open to all of these ideas. And let's go to the next slide. Has you on the ground looking across College. Actually, you're probably standing in the middle of College Street and 23rd, looking down what's now is a parking area. This is as is today. I don't know, you might have snow on it now, but the first step, and like a lot of this work, it's a combination of the public sector doing things and the private sector teaming up. The first is to start to improve the look of the place. A paving pattern, which could even be painted, could be different pavers, but could also be painted. Starting to plant real street trees, along with just the city being committed to making this change. Then the next slide, it's an opportunity for private sector, or actually on the near right, university, redevelopment. At the end, looking down this plaza, there's a private lot that we're showing as redevelopment with a small apartment building to take advantage of this extra value in the frontage. Next slide. And then another layer of investment, more streetscape. And you can start to see, this is right now, this is during the week, this might be the nicest parking lot in the state. And then special events, and on the weekend, you close it off, it becomes a festival, farmer's market. If you look more closely at this, when you see the plan, I think there's somebody has a somebody has a very productive farm. But this area can be used for all sorts of special events. And again, the university is just over your right shoulder. This is right across the street from that major corner between the university and the town. So it's a great opportunity. And one thing that quite a lot of our people who took part in this commented on wanting to see some change in the block that is between 23rd and 20th and Murner and College. It's much larger than most of the other blocks in the area. So, and it's arranged differently. So in terms of walkability, it's not, well, there is room for improvement, and it's really underutilized. First thing to notice, the city has done quite a bit of work improving Dry Run Creek. It's a flood control project mainly, and they have greatly reduced the floodplain. However, there's still a floodplain, and this is an overlay. So there are a lot of properties around it that are within that floodplain. The medium blue, darker blue is the stream itself. The medium blue is the 100-year flood, and the very light blue, the 500-year flood. So that's a complication for development. This project is there's a kind of two projects in one. The first is really all on the public land, and it's about, go ahead. It's about improving the Dry Run Creek. The flood control improvements are there. What this project calls for is expanding that, well, turning it into a greenway with trees, improving the path, and also connecting it across College to Peterson Plaza, where the city is currently working on extending the walkway all the way over to Olive. You see that on the drawing. And adding that, the section between Campus and Murner on the left. The picture at the lower right shows the brick walkway there. You're standing on College looking back towards the Murner and the university, excuse me. And in the distance, you can see the tower, the student housing tower. So this well-lit, beautifully treed kind of natural greenway is a great pathway, a great connector between College Street and the university, where now it's kind of it's a little bit ad hoc. We heard people talk about students walking through the fields and suddenly emerging on the other side. So that's a buildup and improvement, and a creation of taking advantage of Dry Run Creek as an amenity, which it certainly can be. And then the next part of this is, you see there's a parking lot at the very top of that. And it's, first of all, we're talking about this not as just a parking lot, but as one that's environmentally careful. So there's room in there to be planted with bioswales, et cetera, pervious paving. So it is conscious of the environment. This parking would help with the extra development that's going to happen here, take some of the load off of those properties, and be an improvement for all. And the next part of this is the part that's the private sector, and that is through the combination of changing the rules for development. There is, go ahead. Potential big change in this property, this kind of super block. You notice it's now divided into 2 blocks. That increases the walkability and also makes it possible to have a more positive increase in the intensity of development in this site. Now, all of this, all of those brown buildings, that's all private sector development. And that would depend on the property owners making the decision to make that investment when they think it's time. The basic scheme has parking in the middle. It creates a kind of a street up through the middle that connects The first part of it is a street to provide automobile access to the center of those two blocks. Then there is a kind of a civic green in between the two. This would allow, by the way, it'd be built so that emergency vehicles could drive on it, so it would have good fire and emergency vehicle access. And then along the creek, it finishes off with, those buildings would be facing this widened kind of parkway next to the greenway. So this is a very positive new public area for College Hill and the city. And in terms of the private development, part of the incentive is that would be a really desirable place to have an apartment or a condominium overlooking that natural feature. All right. And Mary?
Okay, I will not walk through these again. This is just sort of a reminder of those big ideas. And hopefully now that you've seen the visioning, the prototypical projects, you can see how the ideas were captured during that effort. The next section of the code, of the plan, just a high level, a review of the recommendations overall out of the plan, and then some next steps that would happen in the near term. That's the wrap up. And then after this, there is the appendix that I mentioned, which includes the full economic report, that it includes the input that we got from the sessions back last January, as well as the survey results from the UNI students, et cetera. So there's a lot more background information if you want to dive in a little deeper in the appendix. A couple of questions that we figured people are going to want to ask. We want to let you know, people, when will this plan be adopted? Ideally, you guys will have the chance to review, discuss. The goal is that late spring that it would actually be adopted. People may want to know, is this going to require me to change my home, my business, my property in any way? The short answer is no. As I said at the beginning, the idea is to set the table, to change rules that would help people if they want to redevelop, but this is not going to require any private property owner to change anything that they are currently doing, assuming it is legal today. How big can buildings be? That's a question everyone seems to always ask, no matter what the project is. You might remember the character areas and the frontage types that I described earlier. People should take a look at that. And so depending on the character area, the frontage type that's been indicated, you would get some sense of how big the buildings might be. But I do want to remind people, this is a public review draft. We want to hear back from you. And any new standards or rules for development, we're definitely still in the future. How can you give us your feedback? The plan will be available later this evening. You can download it, you can read it, and we will also have an online survey that will have a series of questions plus opportunities for people to write their comments and feedback. So we would really like to hear back from people, their thoughts on this Imagine College Hill plan. What's next? Again, we ask people to review the plan, give us your feedback. Constructive will be really helpful for all of us moving forward. On March 10th, you all will have a Planning and Zoning Commission hearing specifically to talk further about the plan after you've had a chance to review it, ask questions, discuss, debate. The next step after that, assuming that you all decide to recommend some version of the plan to move forward, will go to the City Council for their review and adoption. Hopefully by late spring, we will start working on potential zoning code updates for the College Hill area. We will be building on the work that has been drafted for the downtown code, which you all will get to hear from Jeff and I again next week when we will be back to present that draft updates to the downtown zoning ordinance to you all. And then ideally, at the end of the summer, next fall, we will come back and have a draft for any zoning changes recommended for College Hill. So that's big picture, where we've been the past 9 months, where we're headed. I said at the beginning, but I want to emphasize this is the College Hill Vision Plan. It's really about the College Hill community and the city of Cedar Falls. So we've worked really hard to try to capture all the input that we've heard. But that is where we are. And I think if the schedule and the time permits, we can take questions. I can let go of the screen. I don't know if Michelle or Karen, Michelle, I think, is orchestrating that. I will stop sharing and we can proceed as you all desire.
All right. Thank you, Mary and Jeff. Let's bring it back to the commission. Any questions?
I know we covered a lot of ground fast.
Mary, I have one. Where can people get a copy of the full report?
It will be when we finish tonight. I will hit a button. It will go live on the ourcedarfalls.com website. It will be available there for download for people to read and review as carefully as they would like.
We will also be having a copy at the library, and there'll be a copy at City Hall for the public to look at.
I just want to say thank you for all of the hard work that's been put into this. I will say that looking at what the vision could be for College Hill is extremely exciting, and exciting for the future generations that could potentially go to UNI, including my own children here in Cedar Falls. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. It's great to work in a place like Cedar Falls and on College Hill where cool things can happen.
Absolutely.
I also would like to state that this is an exciting plan, especially for that area. And you keep bringing up a parking district, and I was just curious what you mean by that.
I'll start, and I don't know if Jeff and Karen and Michelle may want to chime in. In a lot of college communities, I don't know how deeply you want to go into this. What they found is you want to balance. You don't want to require every bedroom of every apartment to have to provide a parking space, because there are quite a few students who don't have cars. So that just adds to the cost of their rent. But at the same time, the neighbors who live nearby don't want to have a whole lot of college students parking all around their houses, et cetera. So in some communities, in college communities in particular, they've developed what they call a parking management district, where if people live in the neighborhood, reside in the neighborhood, own property, or they're renters, they have the ability to get like an on-street parking permit that for a small fee, the people who live there, they make sure they have a permit, they can park on the street in their neighborhood, or students, maybe if they don't have a space, they can do that if they can show residency. But other people can park there typically also, but they'll be time limited, but the people who have the parking permits can park on the street. So that would be similar to what's going on now, but it just would help you balance how the on-street parking is managed. It's not an uncommon thing. The parking study right now indicates there's plenty of parking, but the idea is if you bring in more students closer to the university, you might want to do that. Another thing we didn't touch on here, but came out of the parking study, and we heard also, currently, we have a lot of emphasis about try to manage parking better with UNI. Currently, because the parking for people commuting to UNI is on the far west side of the campus, that people would rather park for free on the neighborhood streets than pay for a permit, not just because of the cost, because it's not that high, but if you can be 2 to 3 blocks from the campus, that's a lot closer. Our studies, the commuter lot at UNI is approximately a half mile from this heart of College Hill that we're talking about. So it's not a hard choice. If I could walk, 500, 600 feet to get to campus versus a half mile, I'm going to choose to do that. So if the parking demand shifts, our recommendation is that developing a parking management district would be something that Cedar Falls should definitely consider.
Thank you.
Other questions from Commission?
That's the only question I have is, would this be considered a TIF district? Or is it-
I don't know if Karen wants to answer that. Technically, I'm sure that it could be, but as far as what all the city would have to go through, I'm going to defer to Karen on that.
Actually, the area is already a TIF district. Not the whole entire study area, but the main part of College Hill is already a TIF district.
All right, any other questions? All right, Karen, I assume it's just informational tonight and it'll come back to us later on here as described. Correct?
That's correct. And we were going to leave this for public review for a period of time. So give everybody a chance to look on the web page and take a look at the plan. There's going to be a survey on there. If you want to take the survey after they've looked through the plan, it kind of leads you through the different sections so you can make comments on the different sections in the plan. I think the survey is fairly detailed in case people want to make comments on certain sections. And then we'll bring it back to you folks in about, when is this, Michelle? Planned for?
Our goal is to have the public hearing on March 10th.
So a month.
Karen, if I could interject, just so it doesn't scare anyone that the survey is detailed, the survey can be done relatively quickly. I would say less than 10 minutes if you just want to quickly do the multiple choice. If you want to provide detailed input, then there is it's flexible, so you could take as much time as you wanted and give us as much feedback. But I don't want to scare people away from giving us any feedback if they're concerned that it will take them too long to do it.
All right, thank you, Mary, Jeff, city staff, and all the community members who participated in the meetings for laying out a vision for our future here. Exciting stuff ahead for us in the College Hill neighborhood. So with that, I'm gonna open it to old business. We're gonna move on to old business.
Thank you.
And our first item is, we're gonna stay in the College Hill neighborhood, and we have an overlay review of 704, 706 West 28th Street. So we're gonna start with the staff introduction, give the applicant an opportunity to speak, have some opportunity for the public to speak, and then bring it back to the commission. So with that, who's kicking us off?
Mr. Stevie is going to present tonight.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're good. Okay. Good evening, commissioners. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this case again after giving notice to neighbors and providing some additional analysis that will hopefully be helpful for your decision. We have received some response from neighbors since the last meeting, which has been provided to commission members. I anticipate that some neighbors are in attendance and may participate as the opportunity for public comment arises. Much of what I say today will be review. This request is regarding a remodel of an existing duplex on the southwest corner of 28th and Walnut, and is in an R2 residence district within the College Hill neighborhood overlay. The proposal is to add bedrooms and other appropriate updates with the intent to double rental occupancy of the property. Normally, this would include a proposal to add more parking, but the applicant already constructed with a permit a second driveway. As noted before, this technically should have been brought before the commission for review and approval. For practical purposes, though, we'll include that driveway in this review. Currently, each unit has 2 bedrooms and 760 square feet of finished floor space. The proposed remodel would bring the number of bedrooms to 4 per unit, which brings the total number of bedrooms to 8. And 1,520 square feet of finished floor space per unit. The overlay defines the adding of bedrooms to a duplex as a substantial improvement. which requires review and approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. So adding bedrooms was the trigger here, which makes sense because while we welcome improvements that benefit residents and neighbors, zoning codes are established in part to regulate density and intensity of use. Before we move on to review and evaluation, it's important to take into account the intent and purpose of the overlay, which has already received a decent amount of attention this evening. The College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District was established for the preservation of neighborhood character and the stabilization of its neighborhoods after a long history of changes and updates to properties that typically increased occupancies and detracted from the original intent of those properties and neighborhoods. This trend and the establish of the overlay called for more scrutiny when reviewing changes that may affect the character of the neighborhood. The next few slides will consider the evaluation criteria, which include change in density, which is really the primary issue we need to consider here. Minimum on-site parking requirements, parking lot standards, stormwater drainage, and open space landscaping requirements, and so on and so forth. So first, let's talk about density. The disposition of the technical review committee was that the original design and carrying capacity of the property was not intended to serve 8 persons aged 18 years or older. While it is perfectly appropriate for this property to be a rental and for the owner to make improvements and finish the basement, doubling the occupancy may not be appropriate given the increased traffic activity and changes in neighborhood character that would result. This review is not to evaluate the appropriateness of the interior, but to consider the exterior effects, since preserving neighborhood character is the purpose of this review. To be clear, denial here does not take away the right to improve a property, but the regulation of density is one of the levers zoning uses to ensure neighborhoods develop appropriately. If the interior remodel did not include the adding of bedrooms, this review may not have been required by the overlay. As requested by several commission members at the previous meeting, here's some analysis regarding the occupancies in the neighborhood. Those in blue are owner occupied. Those in green are properties with less than 4 occupants. In yellow are properties with 4 occupants. In orange are those with 5 to 7 occupants. And red are those with 8 occupants. Some of these are 2-family dwellings or duplexes. Clearly there is a predominance of rental properties here. However, several of the properties within view of this one are owner occupied or have a lower occupancy. You might notice that the properties in red, those with 8 occupants, are significantly larger than the property we're evaluating. And I almost neglected to mention that current occupancy levels are not guaranteed to continue indefinitely. Current code and required reviews will cause many of these occupancy levels to decrease when these properties are sold or transferred. It has been the intent of the most recent rental housing ordinance to gradually reduce occupancy levels so that the rental burden on neighborhoods is moderated. For a little more context, here's the specific occupancy detail for each rental property, noting which ones are duplexes and which ones will be subject to review and potential occupancy reduction upon sale or transfer. Some properties at sale or transfer have already been reduced as staff has applied the current rental housing regulations intended to stabilize neighborhoods. And staff finds that adding density at this time is contrary to the goals of those regulations. There are 2 driveways. This is moving on to on-site parking. There are 2 driveways, one that is 22 feet wide by 40 feet deep, which leads to 2 one-stall garages, and another that is 20 feet wide by 44 feet deep, which was paved recently and runs along the west side of the house. The required dimension of one parking stall for residential uses is 8 by 18 feet. While tandem parking is not optimal for all situations, code does allow tandem stalls to be counted for duplexes. Tandem means no more than 2 stalls arranged one in front of the other. By this standard, the property has enough parking to accommodate 8 persons, 4 cars on each driveway, as illustrated here. Therefore, the site technically meets the requirement. However, with potentially 8 unrelated individuals associated with the property, it will not always be practical for them to park their vehicles as illustrated. Code also requires evaluation of open space and landscaping to consider what should be required as appropriate to the context of the neighborhood. The driveways in the required front yard and side yards are required by code to be no more than 18 feet wide. The recently constructed driveway exceeds this limit. The driveway technically should have gone through a mandatory review and approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, but a recent code review by staff brought this requirement to light. For practical reasons, we will not require the applicant to reduce the width of the brand new driveway. However, there are landscaping requirements to consider. The front and side yards are required to be landscaped with grass, shrubbery, and trees in a manner consistent with the residential neighborhood. On the west side of the duplex, previous to the installation of the new driveway, there was a patio screened with bushes and a fence that were removed as part of that project. To the right, you'll see a picture that shows a view from the street prior to the project and another picture of the parking area showing all landscaping removed. Fortunately, the patio and landscaping serving the other side of the duplex has been preserved. The applicant is required at minimum to replace the grass, but it makes sense for the commission to require that trees and shrubs be used to screen and soften the view of the new paved area. Some of that is also just required by code. So to preserve neighborhood character and maintain consistency with the original carrying capacity of this dwelling, as appropriate to its context, staff recommends that the request to add bedrooms to the building be denied. Again, I want to be absolutely clear that we welcome proposals that improve properties for residents and neighbors. This review is really about density, which is within the purview of our deciding bodies to regulate. Staff also recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission retroactively approve the second driveway subject to the condition that landscaping be replaced to restore what was removed, including 2 overstory trees, front yard plantings, and shrubs to screen the parking from abutting property. These landscaping elements should screen the paved areas from view of the neighbors and help soften the view of the new paved area from the street. I also want to note that while the applicant did not take out the trees, and I confirmed that in order to put in the second driveway, it is not unusual to require trees to be installed as part of a project that affects the look and character of a neighborhood. So with that, I turn the time back over to the commission.
Thank you, Chris. Excuse me. Before we ask the applicant to speak, are there any clarifying questions for city staff?
Hi, Chris. I noticed that when you brought up that one slide about where you need to make adjustment on the density when projects are bought and sold, what would happen with this property if there was only 1 bedroom on each side in the basement, so there'd only be 6 total? Would that still fall under the criteria that would meet the reduction in density?
That's a good question. So let's see, let's bring up that. Talking about this. Oh,
yes.
I guess this slide, right?
Yes, that's the one.
So,
because I see where you have occupancy there with 6 and they're not subject to review.
Right. So there is a provision in the code, in the rental code that requires a reduction in occupancy. If it was 8 before, it would it's, I'll put it this way, it's a per unit, it's on a per unit basis. So since there's 2 units in the duplex, it go from 4 to 3. And for a lot of those single family residences, they're subject to that same reduction. Now there's opportunity for the, for any applicant to request more than that. And there are some review criteria for that. But ultimately, if it doesn't meet that criteria, and I should say the Board of Rental Housing Appeals would look at it, and they would make a determination as to whether it could go higher than those required occupancies. Does that make sense?
Maybe I could provide a little more context too. I think the idea was that it was a good time to review the existing situation when the properties changed hands. And so things would automatically drop to 3 in a lot of cases, but then applicants have an opportunity to request it to go back to 4. And if they can show good reason for the property and the building itself to handle that occupancy, the Board of Rental Housing Appeals would be considering those cases on a case-by-case basis. And that's really their purview to take a look at all the different factors at that point in time at the change of ownership to kind of determine whether it should stay the same or should drop. So it's really on a case-by-case basis on a fairly robust analysis about individual properties.
Any other questions for city staff before we open up to the applicant?
I have a question. The driveway, we are retroactively approving that separately from the basement improvements. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that permit has been opened and closed? The permit's not still open?
I understand it's, we may not have actually closed it, but it's, for all intents and purposes, we can say it's open and closed.
Okay. And then another clarifying question, the landscaping is being tied into that matter and not to the basement improvements?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I had.
Other questions for staff? Okay, at this time, we're going to open it up to the applicant. I think we have a couple of public. We want to open it to the applicant first. Does the applicant have any comments? Wes, I'm going to activate you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Name and address, please, Wes.
My home address or the address of the?
It's home.
What's that?
Home, please.
Oh, 5373 South Hudson Road, Cedar Falls, Iowa. That it?
Yep.
All right. So it was mentioned in the review that places closer to campus might be wanted for higher density, which this duplex is within 1 block of campus, which is kind of proven by the fact that the complaint, I don't know if you guys saw the complaint at the very bottom of the packet, was about parking in Melanie Griffiths in front of her house, which is at 514 West 28th Street, which is a full block farther east. And students park all the way that far just to walk to campus, meaning that the duplex is quite close. It's within a block. And also that with the logistics of parking, I don't necessarily think that the parking in front of her house would be caused by the tenants at my duplex, because I do have the tandem parking, like Chris said. He said it wasn't logistically practical that they would park tandem, but if the street is, like she says, filled all the way to 514 West 28th Street, a block further east, I'm guessing that my tenants will just park tandem instead of parking all the way down there and walking a block and a half to their apartment and just deal with the talking to each other and getting backed out and getting people out that are in front of other people. And the adjacent properties to this duplex were listed as low to moderate density. So 716 West 28th is a three bedroom, but it is the maximum occupancy that lot allows. It's 62 by 136 feet, and which in the new rental change in ownership application the City of Cedar Falls has on their website states that for four people unrelated, 70 feet frontage, and that one only has 62. So that house is at full occupancy, maximum occupancy. 2809 Walnut on the other side of my duplex is 66 by 149, and it is a 4-bedroom, which is actually overoccupied based on the current requirements. And like Chris said, sometimes when they're reviewed, they're downgraded since it is below 70 feet lot width. So both those adjacent are, one is maximum occupancy and the other one is over maximum, but I mean, obviously they have that grandfathered in for now. And my lot is 70 feet frontage, R2, and it is 10,430 square feet, which 8,000 square feet is the required 4,000 per unit in R2 for a duplex, a 2-unit property. And the other red parcel that Chris pointed out down the street, a few houses, the significantly less area on my lot. Actually, one of those red lots is 13,300 square feet. One is 10,900, and mine is 10,400. So I mean, they're pretty close, and those are the other two double 4 duplexes on the street. So the one's within 500 square feet, and the other one's a couple thousand more. But also, further west from those two that weren't on the 350 feet distance from my duplex are quite a few more of those double 4 duplexes, which I know aren't being talked about because they weren't within the scope of my duplex. But I figured since we were talking about the effects of my duplex down at 514 West 28th at Melanie Griffith's place, I figured I better mention those other duplexes that are just as close as her house, if not closer.
Anything further, Wes?
Just a few of the things. I listened to the Imagine College Hill part, and they're talking about less parking than 1 space per bedroom, which doesn't apply to me really. But as far as like concentrating and intensifying student housing near campus, which, like I said, mine is within 1 block of campus, and incremental small scale redevelopment, and she said something about not 500 apartment complexes, like really large ones, which I think mine would fall into the incremental small scale redevelopment. So I just think that this kind of fits the revitalization of the area, as well as all the technical parameters of as far as the lot square footage, the parking, everything fits. I think the re-siding, the new windows, all those improvements will ultimately make the neighborhood a better place rather than detract from it. Also, I wanted to say I do plan on putting landscaping back. I'm not going to leave the yard of dirt like that. I just was trying to get it in right at the end of last summer. I got it like a few days before the city quit taking inspections for the sidewalks and approaches, because like November 15th, I think they stopped. So I was trying to get it in before that, and then it kind of froze over after that. So that's why I haven't done the landscaping yet, but I do plan on replacing the landscaping. Those bushes were like as old as the house, which is like 50 years, and they were kind of woody. And the tenant there, she tries to trim them sometimes, but she said they were getting a little too big and woody. So I think it is good almost that those will be replaced. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission has for me.
All right, thank you, Wes. I'm going to bring it back, but we've got a few public comments coming our way, but I want to bring it back to the commission for clarifying questions to the applicant or staff to clarify anything as well. All right, hearing none, we're going to, I see Sue's hand is up. And so Sue, I'm gonna, well, I think hands all just went down. So is there anyone from the public that would like, oh, there they are again. Bob, I'm gonna activate you, Bob. If you could unmute Bob and give your name and address.
Okay, there we are. I own the house at 2804 Walnut across the street. And I sent a note, which I assume you've seen. I guess the added comment I would make, is that this College Hill neighborhood overlay document or plan that was initiated some years ago. I remember when that was done. And I think the description of it was probably pretty accurate. It's to try to let people know what they can expect. And that would include, people who own rental property and those who just live there as a residence, and people that, the thing is, the city and the owners and neighbors could all know what to expect. The guidelines would be laid out, and that would be very helpful. They would know what they could do and what they couldn't do. And so I think my concern is with the density, and I think the questions are: does the overlay plan apply in this case? And if it does apply, then I think you should follow it. If exceptions are made, then the guidelines that were set up really were not very reliable in the first place. That's my primary comment. If you'd like me to explain further, let me know.
Thank you, Bob. I'm gonna bring it to Sue. Sue, if you could give your unmute and give your name and address.
Sue Duty, 2816 Walnut Street, lived there for 30 odd years. And I have a couple of concerns with this project. I want to go back, if I may, a few years to the Dick McAllister work that they did for the city, where the primary goal was to diversify and reduce the density in the area that I call the foot of the hill. We're not the lower hill, we're actually at the foot of the hill. And this is counter to that. It's, no matter how you look at it, it's putting 8 bodies where there have been a limit of 4. And I'm not concerned about the parking issue, except from a point of view that's already, the damage has already been done. One of the things that came out of that earlier study was that the parking in that area couldn't be on gravel, couldn't be on grass, had to be on concrete. And every square foot of concrete that goes down for increased numbers of people with automobiles reduces the amount of water that goes through the ground and not down the street. Walnut Street, since about 1995, when it was rebuilt, Walnut Street floods whenever it rains. Not a gentle rain, but any decent rain, and Walnut Street floods. And that increased when the change in the requirement of putting concrete down for parking. And it increased the flooding. And I'm concerned that unless we stop saying, put more people in there, more people and more people in there, we're going to have increased flooding. And that, I have had it come up above the sidewalk in a good hard rain. My other concern with this is that it is an increase without any increased diversity. It's putting the same population of students, literally, and increasing that number without any diversity. And what the duplexes, as they were serving as duplexes, have done is have some people within the neighborhood who aren't college students, who aren't mid-20s, who are apt to stay longer. And that's one of the functions and contributions to the neighborhood, that keeping those duplexes that might attract and have attracted in recent history people who live there for 2 or 3 or 4 years and then buy their own home, or people who stay there and ultimately, what it has just happened, purchased the duplex they had lived in. So we're not getting any diversity, and we're getting more density. And I don't think that's in the best interest of what I call my neighborhood.
All right, thank you, sir. I don't see any other hands raised for comments. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to the commission. I'd like to frame the discussion a little bit. It seems like we have 2 issues on the table here. One is the parking, and the other is the increased density. So I would entertain discussion, motion on either.
I guess I would, looking at the existing parking that wasn't approved, didn't go through the proper channels at the time. And to me, that's pretty straightforward. And I would make a motion to approve that with the recommendation, with the requirements that the city has asked for landscaping.
I was thinking about making a motion to permanently or indefinitely table that item because that ship sailed.
Well, we have one motion on the table. I would need to see.
We need to. So if we second that, would we need to vote before? What would our process be?
Let's see if there's a second first, Kyle, and we'll have discussion.
All right.
So we have a motion, basically, Marty, to approve that parking lot based on the landscaping. Is that correct?
Correct. For the city staff's recommendation.
Right. Is there a second? Hearing none. Let's move on. Kyle, other discussion?
Yeah, so I guess I'm not comfortable retroactively approving something and then also retroactively attaching some strings to cover what I would consider to be a minor human error. I don't think there's any major grievance with what was done or approved previously. It didn't follow protocol, so what? But as a commissioner, I'm not really comfortable even by this tiny margin of violating the rules that are in place to approve something and then say we get the landscaping in or not. I don't know why we wouldn't go on the word of making those improvements if they're intended anyway. I don't think we can at the expense of approving something that doesn't technically satisfy the ordinance just to get the landscaping, and that's why I moved to permanently table the parking item.
I would second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table that item. Karen, is that the right approach? I mean, in terms of, we can do that?
I'm not sure. You're just saying that, I mean, I think you need to vote it up or down. Tabling it just puts it on the table, I guess.
No,
I guess
my
the question
motion
is whether what is it you want to accomplish with this? If you want to approve the parking with no landscaping requirement, I guess that would be the question here. And then just to clarify the reason that it is required to go through the commission originally, and unfortunately we did not bring that to you, is so that you have the discretion then to impose any conditions that you feel are appropriate. So, you know, at the time, you know, a new driveway would be poured, the reason the discretion is given to the P&Z and council is to look at the factors involved and, you know, consider whether needs to be conditions imposed. So you do have the discretion to require those kinds of things. I just want to make that clear that that's what this process is about. But you certainly can make any motion that you wish to make with regard to that question.
My thought is that go ahead, Brad.
Would you like to restate your motion, Kyle?
No, I wouldn't. I believe that, well, my intent is that we shouldn't vote up or down on this because it's a moot point for the commission at this juncture. The ship has sailed, as I said earlier. And so my motion to indefinitely table is, I believe, the vehicle that we would use to essentially dismiss an item that's put before us.
Karen, I'm going to ask for clarification there. Is that accurate?
I don't know how tabling it could dismiss it for good. That in a sense leaves it in ambiguous territory, and you know, you could end up with, now this person selling this property with a parking area now that is, well, was it ever formally approved, and you could, you know, have some problem with the sale because of some, you know, unresolved parking issue. I think you want to have it either, you want to get this thing fully approved somehow so it's on the record that it's approved to be there. Otherwise,
Marty, I just don't feel like it's appropriate for us to do that because we would be doing so in violation technically.
Why? I mean, I don't know that that's the case. I mean, the commission is charged with making decisions on this, whether it happened in the proper timely fashion, I think is not the biggest thing, not the biggest issue in the world. That's just the reality of it. So it seems like there should be some closure on this not only for the city and the property owner both, just so that, you know, that thing is not left, since it wasn't done properly to begin with, you know, somebody can call it into question at this point. I think the owner needs to have some closure that it's okay and the city's, you know, that it's been properly signed off on, so there's no questions going forward. I think that's the biggest thing.
With my motion, it would be closure because like I said earlier, that ship has sailed. And so the homeowner or the property owner should have closure in that they pulled a permit, went through proper channels, and got the work done. And then for us to come back retroactively and try and approve something that's technically in violation and then also add strings, not only does it set an inappropriate precedent as far as I'm concerned, but as a commissioner, I don't feel comfortable approving something that is clearly in violation, whether it's by a tiny bit or a lot. I could stand corrected, but I feel like that's more of an argument for a variance, and I don't know that that's really in question and at this point. But I don't think it's something that we should vote on or not. And as far as I understood, the only way that we could dismiss an item from approving or denying would be to table indefinitely. And if there's a better mechanism for doing so, I'm open to revising my motion. Otherwise, I would stand on my motion to table indefinitely. And then if we need to change that.
After some thinking about this a little bit, so let's think this through. If someone were to bring this to the city and say there was an error made, which we We did not bring it to the commission originally prior to the issuance of this permit. We would bring it to the commission at that point and say, you need to make a decision on this matter. This is part of the College Hill overlay. You guys have discretion over those matters, and you would make a recommendation to council. Now, council is the actual decision-making body on this. You aren't, you're just a recommending body. So I think what we're doing here is asking you to make a recommendation to the city council on this particular matter. Yes or no, vote it up or down. You have the discretion, as with any overlay case. That's why it comes to the commission. You have the discretion to impose appropriate conditions. Now, that's up for your discretion. So you can approve this or deny it. You can ask them to take it out. You can, this is your discretion to do this. So I think you need to have some action here. Otherwise, it does kind of put this into limbo.
Perhaps we could table this part of the item or defer the item until the next meeting, seek clarification from the city attorney. Because in my opinion and understanding, then if we would make a motion to approve, then the correct action would be to deny, because if we were presented this and it were presented in a way that was in violation by a foot or two or whatever it was, we wouldn't be able to approve that, and the plans would have to be amended. So because the work has already been done and the permit was issued, I don't think it's really fair to any of the staff involved or to us to do anything but just let it be water over the dam. And so if tabling indefinitely isn't the vehicle for doing so, and if everyone is presumably in agreement that ripping it up and correcting it is unreasonable at this stage in the game, then maybe we can defer the item until we have clarification on the correct course of action.
All right, thank you, Kyle. We have a motion on the table to table this item. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All right, Karen, roll call vote.
Okay. Hartley.
Nay.
Holst.
Nay.
Larson.
Aye.
Lynch.
Aye.
Prideaux. Oh, I guess, sorry, she's not here. Saul.
Aye.
Schrod.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
You got me, Karen.
Quick clarification. My motion
I'm
was.
sorry, did I forget Mr. Leeper? Mr. Leeper, I skipped over you.
Nay.
Okay, so we have a 3-3 tie here. Let's see, let me check my check marks here. We have Larson, Saul, and Schrod voting aye. Is that correct?
Lynch.
And Lynch.
Okay, got it in my wrong column here. And then we have 3 nays, Hartley, Holst, and Leeper. So that motion does carry then.
Just to clarify, my motion was to table indefinitely, but if we get any kind of new information from the city attorney or in further research or discussion amid staff, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't bring it back up for discussion at the next meeting. Do we, Brad or Karen, do we need to make a new motion or make or move to add that item back into business for the next meeting, or what would be the appropriate way to approach that?
So you're straining my memory of the Robert's Rules of Order here, but I believe that the person that made the motion can make a motion for reconsideration at the following meeting when you have another opportunity. So you could potentially, one of those that voted in the affirmative could make a motion at your next meeting to bring that back off the table and reconsider this particular motion.
Okay, so we would do that during new business at the next meeting?
Right, I believe so.
Then I guess then informally, I would just maybe request just to make sure that we're confident in our approach, that maybe we, if you or whomever would be appropriate, maybe discuss with the city attorney if that's the right measure.
Sure,
And we'll go from there.
sure, that'd be fine.
All right, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Kyle. Now let's go to the issue of density, and I would entertain discussion or motion on that issue.
I would just make a note that I was contacted by Melanie Griffin. She dropped off a letter regarding that, which I did forward on to Karen, which I think was just distributed to other folks, but I did encourage her when she did stop by my house to drop it off that she encouraged her there was discussion about other neighbors' interests, and I encouraged them to come and participate as part of this meeting. So wanted to put that out there, so that's on the record.
Thank you, Marty.
For the record, I also received Melanie's husband is a good friend of mine. I play golf with him all the time. So when she contacted me, and I think she copied that same letter to several other commission members, but I did reply to her, say I couldn't issue a opinion on it, but I was concerned about density, which I think, Karen, you forwarded my response to all the commissioners anyway, so everybody's aware of it. But yeah, I think the density issue is a big concern, Brad, and that's why, Chris, that's why I had you bring up that one thing again that showed if you had 8 people in one, you were requesting it when it's sold be dropped to 6. So this was just sold. So how can we allow it to be 8 when it should be at 6?
That's a great question. So the rental code actually differentiates between duplexes and 2-family conversions. So if something's an original duplex, the same rules don't exactly apply. But one of the big sticking points with an original duplex is that it does need to have, regardless of whether it's in the overlay or not, and obviously the overlay has a little bit more sticking points to it, hence why we're considering it. But an original duplex needs to have the parking to accommodate the number of people they're requesting without really exception. So that's, the 2-family conversion is handled differently, and it's automatically brought down to 3, and that has a different stringent review process that has to do with the Board of Rental Housing Appeals and the things that they look at. So
I would just go on to clarify that a little bit more here. So the overlay creates another layer of review here the power has been granted to P&Z and council for that review. I think Ms. Duty kind of explained a little bit about the history of that, but I think, so the College Hill overlay area is when that was adopted, that was then said, we need more scrutiny in this area than all the rest of the rentals in the entire city. And that power then was granted to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. So it is you that are deciding now the density and what's appropriate. And there was a lot of discussion in the overlay about the carrying capacity, the original intent of using the buildings the way they were originally built. And that was a lot of that discussion and why this is coming before you now. So there's not real cut and dried rules here. That's why the discretion is granted for this careful consideration.
I move to approve the request to add the bedrooms. And the reason I do is because there is parking available on the property.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Karen, can you take a roll call?
Yeah, have any discussion?
Oh, sorry, discussion. Sorry, Marty, do you have something to say?
Well, I thought about this and initially I thought, that it probably should be approved. But as I've looked at it a little bit further, I just, I see where the staff is coming from now, and I think where Dale was going with a suggestion of 3 instead of 2, something might be more appropriate in my mind. I know that is a congested area in that area, and so it just seemed to me that we are probably increasing the density in a way that's not beneficial to that neighborhood if we approve it.
Yeah, Marty, I would generally agree, and I think Bob's comment stuck with me is that the intent of the overlay is to let people know what they can expect, and it strikes me that this flies against that. Other comments?
Well, I'll go back to kind of where I kind of alluded to at the last meeting, where we're not changing the footprint and we're not doing a big addition. We're not tearing down something and building something new. We're revitalizing or improving something in the form that it already exists within. And I would have to commend the applicant for taking the above board method and pulling a permit and doing things the correct way. I've, over the years anyway, been enough of these properties where they're ad hoc finished over the years, over the decades, and not safe and don't have adequate egress measures and that sort of thing. There's nothing to stop somebody from not having a permit and painting a couple of walls up or throwing up some makeshift partitions in violation of building codes and sleeping people anyway. I mean, those things happen all the time. And as I've kind of thought about this, like what are the goals on kind of both sides of the argument? One of the, when I think about things like that aren't totally clear and cut and dry, I like to imagine different sorts of scenarios. And the one I came back to is that, what if I was a young professional and bought a duplex with the intent of, having a first kid there and then renting out the other half. I mean, that's a typical American kind of first real estate kind of story and can be a good play. And then in this case, you make a major real estate investment, might have put all your chips in and then not be able to finish the basement or realize something that would be a perfectly ordinary right within property ownership. I understand some of the overtones of the overlay district and how they would apply, but in this case, it seems to be that, I guess another instance where the ship has sailed. It's a duplex with a basement. This could have had a lousy basement finish with or without a building permit 5 or 10 years ago or 20 or 30 years ago, and it would have been fine, and then just re-improving it. If it didn't have if it was a slab on grade and then we're going to jack it up and add the envelope space, what's to say that any basement ever wouldn't have a bedroom added into it? I just don't see how this is. I think the idea of calling this basement refinishing or finishing a substantial improvement or a change to the occupancy that the building itself can hold, I think it's a stretch. And I think this also would set a dangerous precedent on general ownership rights of residential real estate. If it were a house, we could have the same argument. If it's just a house, two bedroom house, 1,000 square foot ranch, pretty typical of the same build year. And then single family ownership, somebody wants to add a couple bedrooms in the basement, we'd have to say no on the same merits. And I just don't see how we can do that. And I'd have to also kind of agree with Leanne's mention that the parking is there. And now that we're past that, I think we heard an earlier discussion from staff, or maybe at the last meeting, that there isn't any technical violation in the density requirements. And so if we're going off of what's technical, I don't think we have a choice here.
Other comments?
I really like the fact that they want to improve the property and improve the neighborhood. I totally support that, but I don't think increasing the density and the amount of occupancy in the property and which will outflow into more parking requirements is a positive for the neighborhood.
Leanne, remind me, you made a motion?
Yes.
And that was?
Just to approve as requested.
Do we have a second?
I seconded.
Okay. Other discussion? Karen, can we vote?
Okay, we ready?
Yep.
Hartley,
Nay.
Holst,
Nay.
Larson,
Aye.
Leeper,
Nay.
Lynch,
Aye.
Saul,
Aye.
Schrod,
Nay.
All right, so that motion fails. Do we have another motion?
Okay, so we have both motions, and we have one table on the parking question, just to summarize, and we will bring some information back to you at your next meeting from the city attorney on that matter. And then we have a denial on the increase in the density.
Just out of curiosity, what are the applicant's options at this point to continue to improve the property? I feel this is kind of a disappointing moment. What can an owner do now at this point that this has been denied?
I'm not sure your question. Anybody has the option to, of course, improve their properties and continue to rent it out as it has been rented in the past. Can rent it to a family, can rent it to students, you can rent it to, anybody that wants to rent the property as it has been rented for years. So.
Well, I guess just to clarify, just so that we're not leaving a property owner in the community hanging on this, there was some discussion earlier about 6 occupants instead of 8. Is that something that we are informally suggesting or encouraging? I don't know that it'd be appropriate to make a motion to approve based on that if that's not what's being requested or what's before us.
Well, they would have the option. They would have the option to come back with an alternate proposal if he wants to.
Okay.
So
Well, that's why I brought that up originally with Chris's diagram there, saying, if this is what they're looking at in the future, now is the chance to start doing that. And that's why I recommended what happens if they add 1 bedroom in the basement. They can still get a fairly sizable amount of rent out of it. And I'm not against the owner redoing the basement. I think it's a great opportunity for him to make an improvement in his investment. I'm a landlord owner myself. So the density issue is one of the things that really bothered me. That's why I voted nay, but I do think he has an option. And if he wants to come back with another option, I think it would pass if he reduced the occupancy.
So the applicant does have the right to take this on to city council, even with your recommendation for denial. He does have that right to do that. So he can do that. And we will certainly be talking to Mr. Geisler after the meeting to find out what he would like to do with this case.
Just in parting, would it be, this is just a discussion point here for other commissioners, would the reduction to 6 total occupants be something that the nays would entertain?
So I think we can't ask a question that's not on the agenda, Mr. Larson. I think we need to make sure that we have something that's posted and publicly. We have a staff report for any kind of request like that. So they certainly could ask for that, and we can bring that back before the commission.
All right, so that item's closed, correct, Karen?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any commission updates?
I just want to remind you again about our special meeting next week. We'll have it same time at 5:30. Jeff and Mary will be back to present the draft for the downtown zoning code. And that will then be available for public review for about a month, a little over a month. So you'll get to see Mary and Jeff again next week at 5:30. And I did send out a message a few weeks ago about, I'm sorry about my dog in the background here, a message laying out the timeline for some work sessions for the commission for reviewing the code to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask the questions that you have about it. It is, you know, a complex document. So I want to make sure that if you can get back to me, if you have any concerns or questions about that timeline, or if there's any of those dates that you won't be able to attend, we understand that we're asking a lot of the commission here. So please reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns about that schedule. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.